The mysterious death of DNC staffer Seth Rich. A White House petition urging Congress to appoint a special prosecutor to investigate his murder is gaining steam. Rich was found shot in Northwest Washington, D.C. in July of 2016. Police say he was the victim of an apparent botched robbery. However, his wallet, credit cards, and cell phone were all found at the scene. Before his murder, Rich questioned ballot integrity during the Election Data Summit in 2015, and this video just surfaced.
Several of you have spoken about provisional ballots and rejected ballots. I guess we've looked at, as an outside practitioner with a vested interest in training our voters, how do we get better access to data that tells us why ballots are rejected, why ballots are cast as provisional, so that we can analyze that and then develop better training guides?
Can one of the election officials speak to any work you've done with either the parties or other groups on that type of information?
Yeah, so from Denver's perspective, one thing that we do, and we do this for sort of the parties or any candidates are involved in any election, we have a secure FTP site, and we post basically who's voted and sort of the status. And so if they have a rejected ballot, whether it's signature discrepancy or unsigned ballot, or maybe they had an undeliverable ballot, all that data is posted daily during the election. And then we actually also proactively send out, because we have to notify the voters if there is some sort of issue with their mail ballot. We also give the parties and the campaigns the exact letter that we send to the voter. So then when they do their follow-up and they contact the voter, they have exactly the same wording that we send out, so there's not confusion. So we've found that actually giving more information and being more upfront with that data with the entities has been much more effective for everybody involved.
Rich was investigating several cases involving the DNC's electoral fraud and voter suppression. He was also set to testify in the case of Hillary Clinton's email investigation. Now, there is a lot of pushback against those that are even talking about this unsolved murder, and there's a media blackout. You have to wonder why there's so little interest in the murder of Rich.
Police, I mean, everybody knows this one, but police say it was a robbery, and of course nothing was taken. You know, expensive watch and over $2,000 of cash, I've heard reported. None of it was taken. That seems very unusual, the most unusual robbery I've ever heard of. Second from that is that the police, there were at least 3 of the first responders on the scene who had body cameras, and none of that footage has surfaced or even been reported. The other thing that's kind of weird is that almost every person involved after he was shot seems to have a very high connection up the chain in the DNC.
So if you're investigating, either from a law enforcement or from an intelligence standpoint, the hacking by a foreign hostile government, wouldn't you want the server? Wouldn't that help you, number one, identify who the attacker was? And if memory serves me, this was early in the summer of 2016 when we learned of the DNC hack. So if they had turned the server over to either you or Director Comey, maybe we would have known more. And maybe there would have been more for you to report. So I guess what I'm asking you is, why would the victim of a crime not turn over a server to the intelligence community or to law enforcement?
I'm not going to argue with you, sir.
Why wouldn't the victim of a crime turn over the evidence to the FBI was the question. And the obvious response here is because the DNC is lying. We know that the DNC leaks were an inside job and that the leaker, Seth Rich, was murdered by the DNC. Yet somehow these obvious facts escaped our senators. This entire Russia investigation is a fraud meant to distract people away from the contents of the leaks. These DNC leaks and the Podesta files confirm that Hillary and company are not only crooked liars, but they're hypocrites as well. Democrats want to complain about the Russians hacking their servers, yet the Obama administration was hacking millions of Americans, mostly conservatives, through the DHS and the IRS, and nobody has gone to prison. They even hacked Donald J. Trump, and again, nobody has gone to prison. This is very relevant to that investigation. This is a huge piece of the pie, because what they're saying is that the Russians hacked the DNC, and this is how we knew that they were criminals. This is how we knew the Democrats were criminals, because the Russians hacked the Democrats. But that's not what happened. The reason that we found out these people are criminals is because it was leaked from the inside. So if they're going to have congressional investigations on Russian collusion, they absolutely need to look into this Seth Rich murder. That's why we're seeing this massive cover-up. That's why we're seeing them just continue on, they're continuing on, droning on about the Russians. The Russians had nothing to do with this. We know the Russians had nothing to do with this for a million different reasons. And even if they did, they told us that Hillary was a criminal. They saved us from electing a criminal as president of the United States. If anything, we should be sending them a thank you card. Thank you, Russia, for letting us know. But it turns out that this was an inside job.
Why would the victim of a crime not turn over a server to the intelligence community or to law enforcement?
I'm not going to argue with you, sir.
And the police officer said he didn't even know he was shot.
Seth Rich's neighbor, Mark Mueller, who was listed on the police report, was at the scene when Rich was murdered of last year. The eyewitness, as you heard, made a shocking statement at the vigil for the late DNC employee and WikiLeaker, where Debbie Wasserman Schultz was in attendance. The witness confirms that he was there when Seth Rich was shot and that police told him Seth didn't even know he was shot. The police report confirms not only that Seth Rich was shot, but he was badly beaten.
Anniversary of Seth Rich's murder, and ever since we learned Rich was a DNC staffer, the conspiracy theories online have taken a life of their own. But today, Fox 5 has learned there is new information that could prove these theorists are in fact right. New information from the family's private investigators suggests there is tangible evidence on Seth Rich's laptop that confirms he was communicating with WikiLeaks prior to his death. The Rich family hired Rod Wheeler, a former MPD homicide detective, to run a parallel investigation into their son's death. Wheeler says he believes there's a cover-up and the police department has been told to back down from the investigation.
The police department nor the FBI has been forthcoming. They haven't been cooperating at all. I believe that the answer to solving his death lies on that computer, which I believe is either at the police department or either at the FBI. I've been told both.
Not only that, you have a mountain of evidence suggesting that he is the WikiLeaks source, which means, by the way, because they're not idiots in Washington, that means people in Washington know he was the source. It just takes one. And the fact that not even one person involved in this fiasco has stepped forward and tried to do the right thing should scare the hell out of you. The one person with any kind of platform, Sean Hannity, steps up, decides to start asking the right questions. And what happens? What happens immediately afterwards? They try to crucify him. Seth Rich died trying to do the right thing. It's time people stood up and said, we're not going to take this anymore. We're not going to allow an elite class to shoot us dead in the streets like a dog. We're not going to allow a complicit media that's basically just a propaganda wing for the elites. Tell us what to think. The elites are so used to the rule of law not applying to them. It's escalated and escalated. It's escalated to the point to where they're literally murdering people right in front of us.
Actually, the means to do it. So an orderly decline of the dollar is actually desirable.
In the United States, how worried are you about the budget deficit and maybe about the possibility of inflation?
Well, certainly a decline in the value of the dollar is necessary in order to compensate for the fact that the U.S. economy will remain rather weak, will be a drag on the global economy. China will emerge as the motor replacing the U.S. consumer, and the U.S. will be actually a drag that's being pulled along through a gradual decline in the value of the dollar. So there would be a slow decline in the value of the dollar, a managed decline. And that would be the adjustment that it needs to be accomplished. Now, it could actually get out of hand. And certainly the fear of inflation will precede inflation itself, but still is a cost. So somebody has to pay it. And I think we have actually the means to do it.
We need to make the Russians pay a price. The other thing we make them pay the price by killing Russians.
Yes. Michael Morell added that the killing of Russians should be done covertly, but in such a way that the Kremlin would get the message.
8 prominent Russians found dead since the U.S. election, 5 of them diplomats, including Ambassador to the UN Vitaly Churkin.
We need to make the Russians pay a price. The other thing we make them pay the price by killing Russians.
Yes.
Covertly. We need to make the Russians pay a price. The other thing we make them pay the price by killing Russians.
Yes.
Covertly.
5 assassination attempts, I'm told.
Russia's Interfax news agency is quoting a source in the Russian aviation industry claiming President Putin's plane may have actually been the target of the attack. It is claimed that the president's jet crossed paths over Warsaw at the exact same height as the doomed Boeing. The planes were said to share a similar form and the colors of red, white, and blue, which of course is Russia's flag. And a spokesperson for Russia's Federal Air Transport Agency refused to give any details, stating that they never comment on the routes of the president and other top officials.
We need to make the Russians pay a price. The other thing we make them pay the price by killing Russians.
Yes.
Covertly.
Obama, Hillary, Bremer, Clapper, and Comey are part of a group hell-bent on world destruction. They need World War III to rebuild a world. The ruling elite have the means to survive a full-blown nuclear war. But for that war to happen, they need the Russians to launch a nuclear strike. So Obama and company have been deliberately and desperately trying to start that war by drawing the Russians closer and closer to a nuclear strike. Obama launched a civil war in Ukraine, a proxy war in Syria. They murdered associates close to Putin and even attempted to murder Putin himself. They downed the Russian fighter MH17, Flight 9268. And where did this adventure begin? It began with Edward Snowden, the supposed leaker that told the world what they've known for years, that the 1984 Orwellian society is spying on you. Let's revisit Snowden's plans. He leaves Honolulu, Obama's home base, to spill the beans. Snowden says he wants to go to South America but embarks for Hong Kong instead. And after leaking his information, instead of leaving Hong Kong for South America, he flies to Moscow, forcing the Russians to take him in. And that's where things kicked off. Just a few months later, just a few months after the Russians gave Snowden asylum, there was war in Ukraine. Then they shot down MH17. Then there was war in Syria. And that's brought us back to everything we've covered today. Breaking news. Obama and the Democrats are trying to murder the world. And they need the Russians to do it. They need the Russians to launch a nuclear strike to get their plans started. That's why Hillary and the media are focusing on the Russians. They want war. They want nuclear war. So don't buy that the Russians did it. Instead, look into Seth Rich. Look into the Podesta files. Look into Pedogate. Look into Obama did it. Bremer did it. Comey did it.
Why would the victim of a crime not turn over a server to the intelligence community or to law enforcement?
I'm not going to argue with you, sir.